I'm Madeline, 31, an events coordinator from Boston who just emptied my savings to help with my brother Ethan's wedding. After the celebration, I checked my account and found an additional $8,400 missing. When I confronted my family, my mother Diana just laughed in my face and said, "You can't do anything about it." My hands trembled as I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. "Don't worry about what happens next," I said calmly. Before continuing this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up to family. Growing up in the Hartwell family meant understanding your place in the hierarchy. For me, that place was always below my younger brother Ethan. My parents, Richard and Diana Hartwell, owned a successful real estate development company in Boston, and from the moment Ethan was born, it was clear he was being groomed to take over the family business. I, on the other hand, was expected to marry well and host dinner parties. Very 1950s of them, I know. Our 5-bedroom colonial house in Brookline was filled with tension and expectations. My father's study was off limits unless summoned, and my mother's perfectionism meant constant criticism of everything from my posture to my career choices. Even my childhood bedroom felt like a guest room, decorated to my mother's taste, not mine. I excelled academically and went to Northeastern University for business, thinking that would finally earn their approval. It didn't. Instead, I was pressured to work at Hartwell Properties after graduation. I lasted 3 years in the marketing department before I couldn't take it anymore. The nepotism, the toxic workplace culture, my father's public criticism of my ideas during meetings. "Marketing events is hardly a career, Madeline," my mother said when I told them I was leaving to become an independent events coordinator. "It's more of a hobby, really." My father was more direct. "You're throwing away opportunities most people would kill for." But I did it anyway. I moved into a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Cambridge and started building my client list. The first 2 years were tough. I lived on ramen and worked 16-hour days. But eventually, I developed a reputation for creating flawless events on tight budgets. While I wasn't making Hartwell money, I was supporting myself and finding fulfillment in my work. My brother Ethan had a different experience entirely. His mediocre grades were excused, his college partying funded, and his position at the company guaranteed. When he met Jessica Barnes at a charity gala 3 years ago, my parents were thrilled. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels up and down the East Coast. The marriage, would be beneficial for everyone. Everyone except me, apparently. Jessica was beautiful, sophisticated, and used to getting her way. She and my mother bonded instantly over their shared love of luxury and status. When Ethan proposed after just 8 months of dating, my parents immediately started planning the wedding of the season. The initial budget discussions happened during a family dinner at my parents' house. I sat quietly eating my mother's underseasoned chicken while they discussed venues and guest lists. "We're thinking the Langham for the reception," my mother announced. "The ballroom can accommodate 300 guests." I nearly choked on my water. 300? I thought this was going to be intimate. Jessica laughed as if I'd told a particularly naive joke. "Ethan's my only shot at a wedding." "I'm not doing intimate." My father cleared his throat. "We'll handle the major expenses, of course. The venue, catering, her dress. And we've already committed to the honeymoon," Jessica's father added. Then my mother turned to me with that look, the one that meant I was about to be volunteered for something. "Madeline, with your connections in the event industry, you could help with flowers and decorations, yes? And perhaps the photography." It wasn't really a question. Before I could respond, they were already discussing the engagement party. By the end of dinner, I had somehow agreed to help with some of the smaller details, though no one had specified what that meant. Over the next few weeks, those smaller details expanded exponentially. Venue deposits, flower arrangements, photographer retainers, welcome baskets for out-of-town guests. Each time I raised concerns about the mounting costs, my mother would say something like, "It's your brother's only wedding, Madeline." Don't be selfish. So, against my better judgment, I dipped into my savings, money I'd been setting aside for a down payment on a condo. It started with small expenses, but they quickly added up. 5,000 became 10,000, and before I knew it, I had committed nearly all of my savings to Ethan and Jessica's perfect day. I told myself it was an investment in family relationships. That maybe, finally, my contribution would be recognized and appreciated. That this time would be different. I couldn't have been more wrong. As an events coordinator, I knew exactly how quickly wedding costs could spiral out of control. What I didn't anticipate was how my professional expertise would be simultaneously exploited and dismissed by my own family. Madeline, you said you could handle the flowers, right? My mother asked during one of our weekly planning meetings at her house. I had agreed to basic floral arrangements for the ceremony and reception tables. Nothing extravagant. Yes, I've contacted 3 florists for quotes based on the original plan we discussed. I replied, pulling out my planning binder. My mother exchanged a look with Jessica. Well, we've been thinking. Instead of simple centerpieces, what about full floral installations? Jessica saw something on Pinterest with suspended orchid garlands over each table. Wouldn't that be divine? The floral installation she was describing would cost at least triple what we had initially discussed. I took a deep breath. Mom, that kind of installation is extremely expensive. We're talking potentially thousands more than the budgeted amount. Jessica pouted. But it would be so beautiful. And you know how much this means to me and Ethan. Speaking of my brother, he was conspicuously absent from most planning sessions, leaving me to navigate the increasingly unreasonable demands of his fiancée and our mother. I can reach out for quotes, I conceded, but I can't guarantee. Wonderful. My mother interrupted, already moving on to the next item. Now, about the venue deposit. They need it by Friday. I frowned. I thought Dad was handling the venue. Another exchanged glance between them. There's been a slight change of plans. Your father's dealing with that situation with the Cambridge property. The timing is just unfortunate. It would be so helpful if you could cover the deposit for now. We'll reimburse you, of course. That, of course, hung in the air like a promise I knew would never be fulfilled. But what could I do? Say no and be painted as the villain who ruined her brother's wedding? So I agreed to the venue deposit. And then to the upgraded linens. And then to the premium open bar package. My best friend Lauren was the only voice of reason during this madness. We met for coffee at our favorite spot in Cambridge, and I unloaded all my frustrations. They're taking advantage of you, Maddie, she said, stirring her latte with more force than necessary. You know that, right? It's complicated, I sighed. It's family. Family doesn't drain your bank account without consideration, Lauren countered. Have they even thanked you properly? I couldn't answer because we both knew the truth. Instead of thanks, I received constant criticism. My ideas were pedestrian, my vendor recommendations not quite up to standard, my concerns about costs petty. To cover the mounting expenses, I started taking on additional clients, working nights and weekends. I coordinated corporate events, birthday parties, even a last-minute bat mitzvah. My apartment became a glorified storage unit for wedding samples and supplies. My social life dwindled to nothing. My health suffered as sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. 2 months before the wedding, I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by spreadsheets and receipts, calculating exactly how much I had already spent. $21,786. Nearly all my savings gone. And there were still outstanding expenses to cover. With shaking hands, I transferred another chunk of money from my savings account to pay the balance for the custom cocktail hour ice sculpture my mother had decided was absolutely essential. As I confirmed the transfer, a wave of nausea hit me. What was I doing? At this rate, I'd have nothing left. The night before the wedding, I was still at the venue at midnight, directing the setup crew and solving last-minute crises. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Don't forget to pick up Jessica's mother's special diet breakfast by 7 a.m. Nothing with gluten. I hadn't slept properly in days. My back ached. My emergency fund was depleted. And as I stood in that half-decorated ballroom, I had the strangest feeling, like I was setting the stage for my own humiliation. Little did I know how prophetic that feeling would be. The morning of Ethan and Jessica's wedding dawned crisp and clear, a perfect October day in New England. By 6 a.m., I was already picking up Jessica's mother's gluten-free breakfast, checking in with vendors, and delivering welcome bags to the hotel rooms of VIP guests. My own dress and makeup would have to wait until the absolute last minute. I arrived at the Langham Hotel ballroom as the floral team was putting the finishing touches on those infamous suspended orchid installations. I had to admit, they were breathtaking, white and pale pink blooms cascading from the ceiling like something out of a fairy tale. They also cost me nearly $4,000 more than the original budget. "Madeline, thank God you're here," my mother said, rushing over in her silk robe, hair already perfectly styled. The place cards have a typo in the Henderson's name. It's simply unacceptable. "No, good morning. No, thank you for handling everything." Just straight to the problems I needed to fix. I spent the next 3 hours putting out fires, reorganizing the seating chart when an unexpected guest arrived, calming Jessica when her makeup artist was 15 minutes late, hunting down my brother when he disappeared for a quick drink with his groomsmen. The ceremony itself was undeniably beautiful. The historic church glowed with candlelight as Jessica floated down the aisle in a custom Vera Wang gown. Ethan actually teared up when he saw her, which surprised me. Maybe there was real love there after all. As I watched them exchange vows, a complex mix of emotions swirled inside me. Pride in having helped create this moment, resentment at the cost, both financial and personal. A pang of loneliness, wondering if I'd ever have something like this for myself. And underneath it all, a persistent, nagging feeling that my contribution would go unacknowledged. That feeling was confirmed at the reception when I overheard my mother talking to her friends near the bar. "Everything came together so beautifully," she was saying, champagne flute in hand. "Diana Hartwell does it again. You know, I personally selected those orchid installations. They're being featured in Boston weddings next month. Not a word about my involvement. Not a mention of who actually paid for those orchids." Later, during dinner, I was seated at a table far from the wedding party with distant cousins and Jessica's former coworkers. As I picked at my $125 per plate salmon, Jessica's father stopped by. "Quite the affair your parents have put on," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Richard mentioned they spared no expense. That's how you do it when it's your only son, right?" I forced a smile and nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Apparently, my parents were taking full credit for the wedding I had largely financed. Even Ethan's acknowledgement of my efforts was brief and superficial. He caught me adjusting a centerpiece and said, "Hey, thanks for helping with all this stuff. Jessica's really happy." Then he was immediately pulled away for another champagne toast. Around 9 p.m., as the band played and guests danced, I escaped to the bathroom for a moment of peace. Locking myself in a stall, I finally let the tears come. I had depleted my savings, worked myself to exhaustion, and for what? To be treated as nothing more than the hired help? I was splashing cold water on my face when Lauren found me. "I've been looking everywhere for you," she said, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted, finally saying out loud what I'd been denying for months. "I'm not okay. This whole thing has been a mistake. I've let them use me again." Lauren handed me a tissue. "It's not too late to stand up for yourself, you know. You don't have to keep playing the role they've assigned you." What am I supposed to do? Make a scene at my brother's wedding? No, but maybe it's time to start setting some boundaries. The wedding's almost over. You've fulfilled your obligations. After this, things need to change. I nodded, knowing she was right. As I reapplied my makeup, I made a silent promise to myself. This would be the last time I sacrificed my well-being for my family's approval. Little did I know that decision would be tested sooner than I expected. As I returned to the reception, I passed the small office the hotel had provided for storing personal items. The door was ajar, and I heard my mother's voice inside. "It's already done," she was saying quietly. "She'll never even notice." Then my brother's voice, "I don't know, Mom. Maddie's already spent so much." "Don't be ridiculous, Ethan. It's just sitting in her account doing nothing. This way it benefits the whole family. Now get back to your wife before she wonders where you've gone." I quickly stepped away before they exited, my heart pounding. What had they done? What were they talking about? The rest of the reception passed in a blur of forced smiles and mounting anxiety. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The moment the last guest departed, I rushed back to my apartment and pulled out my laptop. I had a terrible suspicion about what I might find. Sunday morning after the wedding, I woke up with a pounding headache and that persistent feeling of dread. I'd barely slept, tossing and turning as my mother's words echoed in my mind. "She'll never even notice." Still in my pajamas, I made a strong cup of coffee and opened my laptop. With trembling fingers, I logged into my bank account. And there it was, confirmation of my worst fears. A transfer of $8,400 had been made from my savings account at 9:17 p.m. the previous night, exactly when I'd been hiding in the bathroom having my breakdown. The recipient? Diana Hartwell. The room seemed to tilt sideways. This couldn't be happening. I checked again, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But the transaction details were clear. Transfer to Diana Hartwell. Wedding. I hadn't authorized this. I hadn't even been near my phone or banking app when it happened. How was this possible? Panic rising in my throat, I called the bank's customer service line. After navigating the automated system and verifying my identity, I finally reached a representative. "I need to report an unauthorized transaction," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I see the transfer you're referring to," the representative said after reviewing my account. "It appears it was made through your mobile banking app using your credentials." "That's impossible. I wasn't even using my phone at that time." "Was your phone in your possession the entire evening, Ms. Hartwell?" I thought back. My small clutch purse had been left at the head table during dinner. I'd been running around solving problems, checking on vendors, making sure everything ran smoothly. Anyone could have taken my phone during that time. I'm not sure, I admitted. The representative explained that they could investigate the transaction as potentially fraudulent, but the process would take time. And since it appeared to have been authorized using my credentials, there was no guarantee the money would be returned. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes. Then, methodically, I began gathering evidence. I took screenshots of the unauthorized transfer. I pulled up text messages showing that I was nowhere near my phone at 9:17 p.m., messages to the band leader at 9:08 p.m., and to the venue coordinator at 9:25 p.m. Then I remembered something else. My banking app required either my fingerprint or a PIN for transfers. Neither of those would be easy to bypass unless someone knew my PIN. And then it hit me. My PIN was Ethan's birthday, a number my mother would obviously know. As the pieces fell into place, I felt physically ill. My own mother had stolen from me. And based on the conversation I'd overheard, my brother was at least aware of it, if not directly involved. With shaking hands, I called Lauren. "They stole from me," I said when she answered, my voice breaking. "My own family stole over $8,000 from my account." "What?" Lauren's shock came through clearly. "Maddie, are you sure?" I explained everything. The unauthorized transfer, the conversation I'd overheard, the timing. "You need to confront them," Lauren said firmly. "And you might want to talk to a lawyer first." She was right. I had a law school friend, Sophia, who practiced family law. I texted her immediately, and she agreed to meet me for coffee that afternoon. In the meantime, I continued gathering evidence, downloading bank statements for the past 6 months, compiling a list of all the wedding expenses I'd covered, retrieving emails and texts that showed the escalating financial demands. Sophia listened carefully as I laid out the situation, occasionally taking notes. "This is straightforward theft, Madeline," she said when I finished. "The fact that their family doesn't change that. You have several options, from filing a police report to sending a formal demand letter. The question is, what outcome do you want?" I hadn't really thought about that. What did I want? My money back, obviously. But beyond that, I want them to acknowledge what they did, I said slowly. I want them to understand they can't treat me this way anymore. Sophia nodded. Then we start with a strongly worded letter demanding the return of all funds, including the unauthorized transfer and potentially the wedding expenses you were pressured into covering. We'll make it clear that failure to comply will result in legal action and potentially criminal charges for theft and fraud. She helped me draft the letter, careful to include specific amounts, dates, and a detailed account of the unauthorized access to my banking app. We also prepared a simple police report, ready to be filed if necessary. As I left Sophia's office with the documents in hand, I felt a strange mixture of dread and determination. The thought of confronting my family terrified me. These were the people who had belittled and dismissed me my entire life, who had made me feel that my worth was tied solely to my usefulness to them. But underneath that fear was something new and unfamiliar, righteous anger. They had crossed a line. They had stolen from me. And for once in my life, I wasn't going to let it slide. The post-wedding family brunch was scheduled for 11 a.m. the next day at my parents' house. It would be the perfect opportunity to confront them all at once. As I prepared for bed that night, I placed the envelope containing Sophia's letter, the police report, and all my evidence on my nightstand. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would finally stand up for myself. My parents' house looked exactly as it always did, immaculate, imposing, cold. The colonial-style home, with its perfectly manicured lawn and tasteful Halloween decorations, gave no indication of the confrontation about to unfold inside. I sat in my car for several minutes, clutching the steering wheel, trying to calm my racing heart. "You can do this," I whispered to myself, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I dressed carefully in a navy blue blazer and tailored pants, my power outfit for important client meetings. The envelope with all my evidence was securely in my bag. The housekeeper answered the door with her usual polite smile. "They're in the sunroom, Miss Madeline." I could hear the cheerful chatter and clinking of mimosa glasses before I even entered the room. My mother was holding court, as usual, regaling Jessica's parents with some anecdote while my father nodded along. Ethan and Jessica sat close together on the love seat, looking tired but happy. No one seemed to notice me at first. "Madeline," finally, my mother said when she spotted me, "we were about to start without you. Brunch is getting cold." "Sorry I'm late," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I had some banking issues to sort out this morning." A flicker of something, concern, guilt, annoyance, crossed my mother's face, but she quickly recovered. "Well, you're here now. Have a mimosa and help yourself to the buffet." The spread was elaborate, of course. Smoked salmon, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit, pastries from that expensive French bakery my mother loved. I took a plate but couldn't imagine eating anything. My stomach was in knots. We made it through about 20 minutes of superficial conversation about the wedding, how beautiful everything had been, how moving the ceremony was, how delicious the cake had tasted. Jessica's parents were effusive in their praise of my parents' generosity in hosting such a magnificent event. "Well," my mother said, preening under the compliments, "nothing but the best for our only son." That was my opening. "Speaking of the best," I said, setting down my barely touched plate, "I noticed something interesting when I checked my bank account this morning." The room didn't exactly fall silent, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. My father glanced up from his newspaper. Ethan suddenly became very interested in his coffee. "There was a transfer made last night," I continued, looking directly at my mother. "During the reception. $8,400 from my account to yours, Mom. Jessica's parents exchanged uncomfortable looks. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Madeline, my mother said, her voice light but her eyes warning. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. Someone took my phone during the reception, accessed my banking app, and transferred money to your account without my knowledge or permission. My father cleared his throat. Perhaps this isn't the appropriate time or place for this discussion. When would be appropriate, Dad? When I'm not around. When you can discuss it without me, like you've been doing throughout this entire wedding process. Jessica's mother stood up awkwardly. Perhaps we should give your family some privacy. No, please stay, I said. I'd like witnesses for this conversation. My mother's face hardened. You're being ridiculous and dramatic, as usual. If there was a transfer, I'm sure it was something we had previously discussed for the wedding expenses. We never discussed an additional $8,400. And we certainly never discussed you accessing my accounts without my permission. Madeline, my father cut in, his businessman voice activated. Your mother and I have spent a fortune on this wedding. If there were additional expenses that needed to be covered, I'm sure it was simply a miscommunication. A miscommunication? I pulled out my phone and pulled up the screenshots. This was a deliberate transfer made while I was busy working at the reception. I have evidence that I wasn't even near my phone when it happened. Ethan finally spoke up. Maddie, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Mom probably thought. Stop, I interrupted. I heard you two talking last night in the office. I heard Mom say she'll never even notice, and you expressing concern about how much I'd already spent. My mother's face went from defensive to cold in an instant. Fine. Yes, I made the transfer. That money was needed for the honeymoon upgrade. We discussed adding the private island excursion, remember? Someone had to pay for it. And that someone had to be me? Without my knowledge or consent. Oh, please, my mother scoffed, setting down her mimosa glass with a sharp clink. It's not as if you're using that money for anything important. Meanwhile, this was your brother's special day. I've already contributed nearly $22,000 to Ethan's special day, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. Money I'd been saving for years for a down payment on my own home. Jessica's eyes widened. 22,000? I thought. She turned to Ethan, confusion evident on her face. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Madeline likes to exaggerate. She helped with a few minor details, that's all. That's when I pulled out the folder from my bag and slapped it on the table, making the plates rattle. I have receipts for every single expense. The floral installations? Me. The welcome baskets? Me. The photographer? The cocktail hour upgrades? The linen rentals? All me. My father frowned, reaching for the folder. Let me see that. And now, I continued, my voice shaking with suppressed rage, now you actually stole from me. You took my phone, used my banking app, and transferred money without my permission. That's theft, Mom. That's fraud. My mother actually laughed, a cold, dismissive sound that cut through me like a knife. And what exactly do you think you're going to do about it, Madeline? See your own mother? Call the police on your family? Don't be absurd. You can't do anything, she continued, gaining confidence as she saw the uncertainty in my face. This is family business, and it will stay that way. The money has already been spent on Ethan and Jessica's behalf. It's done. The room was dead silent now. Jessica's parents looked mortified. My father was flipping through my receipts with a deepening frown. Ethan looked pale and uncomfortable. And my mother sat there, smug and certain of her victory. My hands were trembling as I reached into my bag again. Actually, I said quietly, I can do quite a lot. I pulled out the envelope Sophia had prepared and placed it on the table. This contains a formal demand letter for the return of all unauthorized funds prepared by my lawyer. It also contains a police report for theft and fraud, ready to be filed. My mother's smirk faltered slightly. You're bluffing. I also have evidence that you accessed my phone without permission, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. The banking app logged the location of the transfer, the exact coordinates of the Langham Hotel ballroom. And I have text messages proving I was in a completely different part of the venue at that time. My father finally looked up from the receipts, his face uncharacteristically serious. Diana, did you really transfer money from Madeline's account without her knowledge? For the first time, my mother looked slightly uncertain. Richard, she's being completely unreasonable. It was for Ethan's honeymoon. We've always helped the children. Theft isn't helping, Mom, I interrupted. And I'm not a child. I'm a 31-year-old woman who worked hard for every dollar you took. Don't worry about what happens next, I added, echoing her dismissive tone from earlier. My lawyer has outlined it all very clearly in the letter. You have 48 hours to return the full amount of $8,400 plus interest. If you fail to do so, I will file the police report and pursue all available legal remedies. My mother's face flushed with anger. You wouldn't dare. Think of what this would do to the family name, to the business, your brother's reputation. You should have thought of that before you stole from me. My father was now reading the lawyer's letter, his expression growing more grave with each line. Diana, this is serious. They're threatening criminal charges. It's a bluff, my mother insisted, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. It's not a bluff, I said, standing up. And there's one more thing you should know. The Langham has security cameras in all hallways. I've already requested the footage from last night showing who entered and exited the office where my purse was kept. That should provide interesting viewing for the fraud investigators. Ethan finally found his voice. Mom, did you really take Maddie's phone and transfer money without asking her? My mother glared at him. I did what was necessary for your honeymoon. Your sister was being difficult about the additional expenses. Difficult? I repeated incredulously. I spent my entire savings on this wedding. There was nothing left to give. You spent that much? Ethan looked genuinely shocked. Mom told me you were just helping with a few small things. That most of it was coming from them and Jessica's parents. Well, she lied, I said bluntly. Just like she's been lying to everyone about who really paid for this wedding. Jessica suddenly stood up, looking distressed. I had no idea, Madeline. Truly. I would never have asked for so many upgrades if I'd known you were paying for them personally. She turned to my mother, anger flashing in her eyes. You told me her company was covering most of it as a portfolio builder. That she wanted to use our wedding to attract high-end clients. The glass Jessica had been holding slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor with a loud crash that made everyone jump. The mimosa splashed across my mother's cream-colored rug, a perfect orange stain spreading across the pristine surface. In the shocked silence that followed, I picked up my bag and the envelope. You have 48 hours, I repeated. Then I walked out, leaving my stunned family behind. The sound of shattering glass still seemed to echo in the air as I walked steadily toward the front door. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, but for the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't backing down from my family. Madeline, wait. It was Ethan's voice behind me. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Please, he said, coming closer. We need to talk about this. I took a deep breath and faced him. My brother looked genuinely distressed, his wedding day glow completely gone. There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. Mom stole from me. She's been manipulating all of us, and I'm done. I didn't know, he said, running a hand through his hair. I swear, Maddie, I didn't know how much you were contributing. Mom kept saying everything was handled, that you were happy to help with some small details. From the sunroom, I could hear raised voices, my father's deep baritone demanding answers, my mother's defensive replies, Jessica's parents' shocked exclamations. Would it have mattered if you had known? I asked quietly. You've never stood up for me before. The hurt in his eyes seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled by my family too many times. I'm sorry, he said simply. You're right. I've always just gone along with whatever Mom and Dad wanted. It was easier. Well, it hasn't been easy for me. Before Ethan could respond, my mother stormed into the foyer, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. "How dare you?" she hissed. "How dare you air our private business in front of Jessica's parents? Do you have any idea what you've done?" My father appeared behind her, looking more tired than angry. "Diana, enough." "No, Richard. She's threatening to go to the police. Over a simple misunderstanding. After everything we've done for her." "What exactly have you done for me, Mom?" I interrupted. "Belittled my career? Dismissed my feelings? Used me as an ATM for Ethan's wedding. We gave you everything," she shot back. "The best school's a position in the family business," which came with constant criticism and no respect. I finished for her. "And none of that gives you the right to steal from me." Jessica and her parents had emerged from the sunroom now, standing awkwardly in the background of our family drama. Jessica looked close to tears. "Mr. and Mrs. Barnes," I said, addressing them directly, "I apologize that you had to witness this. But I think it's important that everything is out in the open now." Jessica's father nodded stiffly. "We understand. And for what it's worth, we had no idea about any of this." My mother made a small sound of distress, watching her carefully cultivated social image crumble before her eyes. My father stepped forward, assuming the role of family patriarch and problem solver. "Madeline, let's discuss this rationally. The money will be returned to your account immediately with interest. There's no need for legal action or police involvement. It's not just about the money, Dad. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about treating me like an actual member of this family instead of someone you can use and discard at will." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We've always what? Looked down on me? Made me feel less than? Taken advantage of my desire to be accepted?" My voice was steady now, my previous trembling gone. Years of suppressed feelings were finally finding their voice. "I have spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. I've twisted myself into knots trying to be the daughter you wanted. I've given up my savings, my time, my self-respect, all to please you. And it's never been enough." I looked at each of them in turn, my red-faced mother, my grave father, my conflicted brother. "I'm done," I said simply. "I'm done trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I'm done being the family ATM and doormat. I'm done." A heavy silence fell over the entryway. Outside, through the beveled glass of the front door, I could see the autumn leaves swirling in the breeze. Inside, time seemed suspended in the aftermath of my declaration. It was Jessica who broke the silence. "Madeline is right," she said, stepping forward to stand beside me. "What happened wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was wrong. And I won't start my marriage with this kind of deception." She turned to Ethan. "We need to make this right." My brother looked from Jessica to me, then to our parents. For perhaps the first time in his life, he seemed to be truly considering the weight of his choices. "Jessica's right," he finally said. "Mom, Dad, this isn't how we treat family. Maddie deserves better. She always has." My mother looked as though she'd been slapped. "Ethan, you can't possibly." "I can and I am," he interrupted, his voice firm. "The money will be returned today. All of it, not just the $8,000 from last night, but everything Maddie contributed to our wedding. We'll figure out how to pay her back, even if it takes time. And there needs to be an apology," Jessica added. "A real one." My father nodded slowly. "Agreed." "Diana?" My mother looked trapped, her eyes darting between them like a cornered animal. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. This was probably the first time in her life that her manipulations had been so thoroughly exposed and rejected. I may have been overzealous in my desire to give Ethan and Jessica the perfect wedding, she finally conceded, though her tone suggested she still didn't believe she'd done anything truly wrong. "You stole from your daughter," my father said bluntly. "Call it what it is." The stark statement hung in the air. My mother's shoulders sagged slightly, her perfect posture faltering. "I took money without permission," she admitted reluctantly. "It was wrong. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was more acknowledgement of wrongdoing than I'd ever received from her before. "The money will be in your account by the end of the day," my father promised. "All of it." "And Madeline, I owe you an apology too. I should have been paying closer attention. I should have protected you better." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. This wasn't the time for emotional reconciliation. Not yet. There was too much damage, too many years of hurt to be erased by one confrontation. "Thank you," I said simply. "I'll be expecting the transfer." I opened the front door, letting in a gust of cool autumn air. "This doesn't fix everything," I added, looking back at them. "But it's a start." As I walked to my car, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a burden I'd been carrying for years. The future of my relationship with my family was uncertain, but for the first time, I was setting the terms. And that made all the difference. True to my father's word, the money appeared in my account that evening, not just the stolen $8,400, but the full amount I had spent on the wedding, plus interest. $22,786 was now safely back where it belonged. I stared at the account balance on my phone screen for a long time, processing what had happened. The money was back, but something fundamental had changed. The confrontation had torn open the carefully maintained facade of our family dynamics, exposing the rot beneath. It was painful, but also strangely liberating, like lancing a festering wound to finally begin healing. The days following the confrontation were quiet. No calls from my mother, which was unprecedented. My father sent a brief, formal email confirming the transfer and suggesting we take some time before discussing things further. Ethan texted several times, his messages awkward but seemingly genuine in their regret. "I never meant for things to happen this way," he wrote. "I should have paid more attention. I should have stood up for you sooner." It was easy to ignore the messages at first, to wrap myself in righteous anger. But as the days passed, I found myself considering the possibility that this rupture might actually lead to something better, not just for me, but for all of us. A week after the confrontation, I made my first appointment with Dr. Bennett, a therapist Lauren had recommended. "Family dynamics don't develop overnight," Dr. Bennett said during our initial session, "and they won't be resolved overnight either. But recognizing the patterns is the first step toward breaking them." Over the following weeks, our sessions helped me understand how deeply I had internalized my family's treatment of me. How I had come to believe that my value was tied to my usefulness to others. How I had accepted as normal what was actually emotional manipulation and financial exploitation. "You're describing classic golden child and scapegoat dynamics," Dr. Bennett explained. "Your brother was elevated while you were devalued, creating an unhealthy system that served your parents' needs but damaged both you and your brother in different ways." It was difficult work examining these painful patterns. Some days I left therapy feeling raw and exposed, but gradually I began to develop a stronger sense of my own worth, one that wasn't dependent on my family's approval. Lauren was my rock during this period of transformation. She checked in daily, celebrated my small victories, and listened without judgment when I needed to vent. "I'm proud of you," she told me over dinner one evening, about a month after the confrontation. "Do you realize how much courage it took to do what you did? Most people never find the strength to stand up to their family like that." I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the glass of wine in my hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Sure you could have," she countered. "But I'm glad you didn't have to." Professional changes followed the personal ones. With my savings restored, I finally had the security to be more selective about my clients. I focused on working with people who valued my expertise and respected my boundaries, a novel concept after years of family conditioning. 3 months after the wedding, I launched my own boutique event planning business, specializing in meaningful celebrations on moderate budgets. My tagline, "Extraordinary moments don't require extraordinary spending," was a subtle rebellion against the excess I'd been forced to participate in for Ethan's wedding. My mother finally called about 2 months after the confrontation. The conversation was stiff and careful, nothing like our usual dynamic where she dominated and I acquiesced. "Your father and I have been doing some reflecting," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "We've started seeing a family therapist." She suggested I reach out. I was surprised, but cautiously optimistic. "That's good to hear. She says we have unhealthy patterns, that we've been unfair to you." Each admission seemed painfully extracted. I'm finding it challenging to accept some of her perspectives. But I'm trying. It wasn't an apology exactly, but from my mother, it was revolutionary. The Diana Hartwell I had known my entire life would never have admitted to being wrong or seeking help. "I appreciate you telling me this," I said carefully. "I've been seeing someone too. It's been helpful." We talked for about 15 minutes, the conversation awkward, but less combative than any we'd had in years. Before hanging up, she hesitantly asked if I might be willing to join them for a family therapy session sometime in the future. I told her I would consider it, and was surprised to realize I meant it. Ethan and Jessica returned from their honeymoon to a very different family situation than the one they'd left. They invited me to dinner at their new apartment about a week after they returned. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Ethan said as we sat around their dining table, "about how I've benefited from the way Mom and Dad treated us differently. I never questioned it because it worked in my favor." "I'm sorry, Maddie." Jessica reached over and squeezed his hand encouragingly. "We both are," she added. "And we want you to know that in our home, you'll always be respected and valued." Their words touched me more deeply than I had expected. The carefully constructed wall of resentment I had built against Ethan began to show its first cracks. As the holiday season approached, I made the decision to break tradition for the first time in my life. Instead of attending the formal Hartwell family Thanksgiving dinner, I accepted an invitation from Lauren to join her family at their lake house in New Hampshire. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Where Hartwell Thanksgivings were rigid affairs with perfect table settings and stilted conversation, the Sullivan family gathering was chaotic, warm, and genuine. Lauren's parents welcomed me as if I were another daughter. Her brothers argued good-naturedly about football. Her grandmother insisted on teaching me her secret recipe for cranberry sauce. "So this is what normal families are like," I whispered to Lauren as we helped clear the dinner dishes. She laughed. "Trust me, we have our own brand of dysfunction. It's just a little less intense than yours." That night, in the small guest bedroom with its patchwork quilt and view of the moonlit lake, I cried, not from sadness, but from the realization of what I had been missing all these years. And from the hope that maybe, just maybe, something better was possible for my own family. By Christmas, I felt strong enough to accept a modified invitation from my parents, Christmas Eve dinner, but not the overnight stay that had always been expected. I arrived at the familiar colonial house with a sense of calm determination rather than the anxious desire to please that had characterized my previous visits. The evening was far from perfect. My mother still made several comments that would have sent me spiraling in the past. But now, with therapy and distance, I could see them for what they were, her insecurities projected onto me, rather than accurate reflections of my worth. More importantly, I could respond differently. When she criticized my choice of dessert as too simple for a special occasion, I didn't apologize or become defensive. "I like simple sometimes," I said evenly. "Not everything needs to be elaborate to be valuable." She blinked, surprised by my response, and after a moment simply said, "I suppose that's true." My father, in his own reserved way, seemed to be making an effort. He asked genuine questions about my business and actually listened to my answers. Ethan and Jessica maintained a united front in creating a more balanced family dynamic, gently redirecting conversations when they veered into old patterns. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how far we had all come in just a few months. The theft, as painful as it had been, had forced a necessary reckoning. The family system that had damaged all of us in different ways was slowly, imperfectly beginning to heal. In the new year, I put a deposit down on a small condo in Cambridge, a place that would truly be mine, decorated according to my taste rather than my mother's expectations. As I signed the paperwork, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. Standing up to my family had been terrifying. The confrontation had been messy and painful. The aftermath had required courage and persistence. But on the other side of that difficult process was something I had never fully experienced before: freedom. Freedom from toxic patterns. Freedom from unreasonable expectations. Freedom to define my own worth. I still had work to do. We all did. Family healing doesn't happen overnight. Some days were better than others. Some conversations still triggered old wounds. But we were trying, and that was more than I could have hoped for 6 months ago. As I look back on this experience now, I realize that the most valuable thing I gained wasn't the returned money, though that certainly helped. It was the knowledge that I could stand up for myself and survive. That I could set boundaries and maintain them. That I deserved respect and had the power to demand it. If you're watching this and recognizing your own family dynamics in my story, please know that you're not alone. It's never too late to break unhealthy patterns. It's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. It's never too late to start healing. Have you ever had to confront family members about their behavior? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of boundary setting and self-discovery. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth isn't determined by how useful you are to others. You matter simply because you exist.